The 2023 NBA draft class has proven to be quite fascinating thus far. There's certainly a wealth of talent, but several players at the top haven't fully met expectations. Other prospects further down the list appear to be significantly better, yet at the forefront we have Victor Wembanyama. If I were to reassess any of these picks, I would definitely begin with an A++ grade for San Antonio. They had no intention of choosing anyone else. There was some speculation regarding Scoot Henderson and Brandon Miller, but in reality it was clear they were always going with Victor Wembanyama. It felt like half the league was purposely losing games to secure this player, and honestly, he has somewhat exceeded predictions. I've mentioned before my doubts about how his offensive skills would translate right away, as he needed to develop a skill set, but defensively, he was always ready. Now, in this season, he's averaging around 25 points per game and shooting impressively from three-point range. San Antonio has had to adjust their approach with him, including playing him primarily at the center, which wasn't the case throughout his entire rookie year. However, I truly believe we're not too far off from Victor Wembanyama potentially being among the 5 best players in the league, possibly even the top player and an MVP contender. He's only 20 years old, and this is just his second year, definitely an A++ grade. Beyond every grade, you knew that regarding some of these other players, second overall is Brandon Miller heading to Charlotte, and I assigned them in a grade. One aspect to highlight is that if they sit within the top 10 of my redraft for this class, I'll display that on screen, of course. Wembanyama goes first overall in a redraft, with Brandon Miller at number 3. That's not entirely negative. He's had a somewhat inconsistent beginning to his career, but I can still envision the long-term potential of Brandon Miller if he improves his rim attacks and gains some strength. A lot of his mid-range scoring and shooting abilities are undoubtedly there, and he pairs well with LaMelo Ball, forming a strong backcourt duo in Charlotte. Considering where they picked him, it's a superior choice compared to Scoot Henderson, whom we'll discuss next. I mention this as someone who believed Scoot should have been the second pick in this draft. However, Brandon Miller has surpassed expectations, and I give them a grade for that. In contrast, Scoot Henderson, drafted 3rd overall, receives an F grade and doesn't make the top 10 in the redraft. Honestly, this is one of the more perplexing evaluations I've had regarding any draft prospect. I believed Scoot Henderson wasn't necessarily a sure bet as a guard, but if Victor Wembanyama weren't in the class, he likely would have gone first overall. In my opinion, other classes had different dynamics. There may have been a time when he could have been the top pick overall, but that hasn't materialized. He showed up and began wearing goggles due to an eye issue that he hadn't experienced before. His aggression to attack the rim is missing, and his in-game performance is lacking. I'm uncertain about the cause, whether it's a G League issue or a confidence problem, but Scoot Henderson has not been performing well, and he hasn't shown much quality since entering the league. It's still early for him to improve, yet when considering the talent ranking from this class, particularly with a couple of players clearly ahead of him in a re-evaluation, selecting him as the 3rd overall pick is not favorable for the Blazers. Moving on, however, is one of my favorite selections from the entire draft, who I'd actually place 2nd overall in a re-evaluation. Ahead of someone like Brandon Miller is Amen Thompson going to the Houston Rockets. They certainly deserve an A+ grade, as he truly is developing the season after being utilized minimally last year and briefly playing small ball 5 alongside Jabari Smith as Houston found success late in the year without Alperen Sengun. He is a crucial asset for Houston, long-term, potentially becoming a foundational piece once Jalen Green or Dylan Brooks is no longer part of the team. Ultimately, when they move on from Jabari Smith, Amen Thompson's defensive skills, improving offensive capabilities, athleticism, and rebounding efforts will be significant. He is an incredible player who is set to be an exceptional complementary asset, particularly if he can keep improving his jump shot. If he doesn't, he might turn into a more refined version of Aaron Gordon. Considering that he was so unrefined and uncertain coming out of the draft, acquiring him at this 4th spot in this class is excellent value for Houston. Quickly though, I'd like to recognize today's video sponsor, PricePick. Then you choose more or less for each of these figures, and if you're right, you win cash. For instance, I can mix these playoff football games with some regular season NBA games throughout the week, and if I'm correct on more or less for each, I win. So if I were you, I would click that link in the description, grab that $50 immediately upon placing your first $5 lineup and watch for those promotions on PrizePicks. Additionally, that way you have a lot to focus on while watching these playoff games. Be sure to check out the link in the description and have some fun on PrizePicks. Thank you again to PrizePicks for sponsoring this video. Next, we move to someone who is quite challenging to assess at the moment, R.R. Thompson, a men's brother. I assigned him a B+ grade mainly because we haven't seen much of him. He had a blood clot issue earlier in the season that limited his play, so we really didn't see him very often this year, and last year was somewhat inconsistent as well. I still appreciate his talent, and overall I can't really give him too low of a grade, hence the B+. Following this, there's one that I genuinely considered giving an even higher grade to, and that is the Orlando Magic with Anthony Black. In a redraft, he goes 7th, but outside the top few players in the redraft, there's not much differentiation. I assigned Orlando a B+ grade. In fact, I contemplated giving them an A because I believe Anthony Black is quite impressive. He can defend well, possesses great size, and needs to work on his shooting, but he has legitimate playmaking skills and can get to the rim effectively. I think he will be a valuable asset for Orlando in the long run, or a potential trade piece for them, especially considering how unusual this area of the top 10 was once we had clarity on the top 5 contenders, the Thompson twins, Brandon Miller, and Scoot Hendersons. Then, naturally, at the top, I appreciate the value for Anani Black, and I believe that when we reevaluate this in a few years, I'd be surprised if he isn't ranked higher than 7th in a redraft. Speaking of another player I truly like, perhaps more than others, Washington selects Bilal Kaval here, and in a redraft, I have him at 10th. I honestly want to rate him higher, but it's challenging once you step outside the top few players in a redraft. Yet, I assigned Washington a grade. This was indeed a bit riskier, as they opted for more of a gamble here, and I believe Ball will prove to be very strong long-term. He needs to keep building strength and improving his offensive skills, but they were aware of that when they drafted him, considering he wasn't playing at high levels in international basketball a year before being selected. Now he has games where he scores 20 points in the NBA, and I genuinely think the versatility on both ends, along with his fluid skill set, is remarkable. I love his body control, all those attributes for Bal Kali, and I'm fond of that choice for Washington. Once again, I anticipate he'll rank above 10th in a redraft a few years from now. Next, there are a couple of players that are quite hard to evaluate, honestly, in Jarvis Walker and Taylor Hendricks. I assigned both an SA grade. We haven't really seen much from either, and just as it appeared, Taylor Hendricks was beginning to find his rhythm. He encountered an injury problem, so currently, it seems almost like a non-grade given how early it is in their careers at this stage. Technically, we have Dallas, but then he got traded to OKC with Case Wallace heading to Oklahoma City, for which I assigned them a grade. He's a player I would consider including in a redraft. However, there are several individuals I don't have him ranked with now, though I could certainly be swayed to place him as high as 7th in a redraft. He's a solid complementary player for Oklahoma City and landed in a great position where he can simply develop into that role. In OKC, he's going to keep evolving as a shooter. I really appreciate him defensively and view him as a valuable supporting piece for the Thunder. Unfortunately for Orlando, their second lottery selection doesn't perform as well. It's Jed Howard, for which I assigned a D. It's somewhat surprising he isn't getting much playing time, even with all the injuries, indicating they might realize he isn't as good as expected. This choice received criticism during the draft because there were alternatives they could have picked if they wanted a wing that could defend and shoot proficiently. They certainly believed his shooting upside was significantly higher than what he has demonstrated thus far, despite displaying some potential in Summer League. Sadly, it appears he's being outperformed by other players like Tristan D. Silva in the Orlando rotation. He probably isn't going to be a strong pick for Orlando long-term. At 12, it's Derek Lively for Dallas, whom I rank 5th in a redraft, giving it a grade from my perspective. Not many were fans of this selection for Dallas, since Lively was seen as a divisive prospect. Some viewed him as a high-upside versatile defender who could effectively roll to the rim, while others perceived him as a highly touted recruit who underperformed in college and aimed to forge his own path. Upon entering the league, he has showcased impressive defense, fantastic athleticism, solid size, and the ability to rim run everything you want from a modern center who isn't a superstar. The Mavs have reaped these benefits from Derek Lively, and it would be great to see him possibly expand his role in the future, especially once they move on from Daniel Gafford. For 13, Toronto selects, I'll just refer to him as Grady, to avoid the risk of the video being taken down. Grady is picked 4th overall in a redraft, something I wouldn't have anticipated a year ago. He essentially didn't make any notable impact as a rookie, but he has been fantastic in his second year. This merits a grade for Toronto, a development I certainly didn't foresee. He's suddenly showcased impressive scoring abilities. We knew he had good size and shooting skills, but his proficiency in attacking closeouts and navigating multiple screens off the ball has been outstanding in Toronto. I've always liked 14, Jordan Hawkins from New Orleans, prior to the draft, but he hasn't fully met my expectations despite having some chances. I placed him 6th in this redraft, but you could easily argue for Bilal Coulibaly or Anthony Black in that spot. The redraft is somewhat tricky, and I gave New Orleans a B grade because they missed potential value from a few players. However, the situation in New Orleans complicates carving out a prominent role due to the presence of many players, so I don't fault him for not reaching my desired expectations just yet, as it's still early in his career. At 15, Atlanta's Kobe Bufkin hasn't made an impression. I have barely noticed him. There are several strong candidates here, but there are also notable misses in the late lottery and the latter part of the second round. At 16, the Jazz selected Keon George, and I assigned him an A for how positively his career has progressed so far. However, I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't turn out to be that significant in the long run. He can score, but he's on a struggling team and receiving more minutes than he might get on some other teams. I'm somewhat apprehensive about his long-term prospects, especially regarding where he stands 5 years down the line, in a redraft or with a grade. Nonetheless, I will give Utah an NA for how well he has begun his career. 17. Jalen Hino has been unproductive for the Lakers, earning an F. Furthermore, when you think about the next few selections here that could have been picked and the potential value from the first and possibly into the second round of this class, it must be an F. 18. Haim Hawks was 9th in a redraft, and I assigned the Heat a B+ for that choice. He's had a down year thus far and is struggling to find his niche, yet he made an immediate impact as a rookie, and if he remains in Miami, he is poised to have a very successful career while continuing to improve offensively. He certainly would have been a superior choice for the Lakers, Atlanta, or even Orlando at 11, as all these teams missed out by allowing Hawks to drop to 18. 19. A player who would have received a better grade, and certainly been in the redraft if not for his poor performance this year, is Brandon Pijai. I gave the Warriors a B+ grade for him as well, as I still believe there's much to appreciate about his potential. As he performed during his rookie year, and then suddenly struggle with basketball. However, there have certainly been some issues this season, notably that his playmaking vision hasn't been evident, and he hasn't shot the ball well. Considering his injury and the necessity of wearing a mask, among other factors, there have also been numerous rotation challenges in Golden State. I would still award him a B+ grade, but it has definitely been a tough year for him. At pick 20, the significant narrative of the draft was Cam Whitmore dropping to this position. Many believed he would be a top 5 or 7 selection, but he slipped due to injury problems and potential attitude worries. Nonetheless, I will give Houston a B+, because Cam Whitmore possesses immense talent, even though he's spent time in the G League and hasn't quite integrated into the impressive Houston rotation. Ultimately, I expect he'll prove valuable, especially for a pick this low. I've covered the top 20 picks, but there are a few other players who might not be worth discussing, so I'll start to skip picks now. At 25, we have Marcus Sasser landing in Detroit. I assigned a B grade to them, as I see him becoming a solid rotation player who can shoot well. At 26, Ben Shepherd is a decent two-way player for Indiana, and I gave them a B. At 29, Julian Strawther joins the Nuggets, and I rated that pick as a B+, despite their rotation being relatively young. They're encountering numerous challenges in locating any effective shooter he's providing for them, and to me, that significantly reflects how Denver perceives him. Thus, I assigned them a B+ grade. Now, we proceed to the second round, which is arguably the strong point of this draft class. Andre Jackson, who lands in Milwaukee, receives a grade from me. He possesses an unconventional shooting style, but has managed to achieve at least moderate offensive consistency and has been crucial in Milwaukee's turnaround this season. Defensively, he contributes athleticism and energy that the team sorely needed. Initially, this was a much maligned selection, but it ultimately benefited Milwaukee. Securing rotation players on a championship contending team in the second round of a not particularly deep class is commendable and earns a favorable grade. Orlando ends up with an A+ for getting a player like Anthony Black, who I would rank 8th in a redraft. Honestly, if someone told me he could be the 4th best player from this class in a few years, I would readily agree. G.G. Jackson, chosen by the Grizzlies, undoubtedly earns an A+ grade from me. Although he hasn't played this season as of the recording of this video due to a foot injury, he has stepped up as a rookie amid Memphis's injury woes and showcased himself as a genuine NBA talent. Being the youngest player in the league, he's still trying to identify his ideal position. He can shoot, possesses excellent athleticism, and has notable scoring skills, making G.G. Jackson a hidden gem in this draft class. I wouldn't be shocked if we're redrafting him among the top 5 of this class a few years down the line when I revisit this video 51. Now, the Nets select Jalen Wilson, for whom I assigned a B+ grade, as I believe he will become a reliable rotation player for them going forward. This choice generated excitement back then, and has certainly paid off in Brooklyn. 52, the Suns opt for Twan Kamar, who subsequently gets traded to Portland, a player the Blazers coveted in the Damen trade, with the Suns partaking in that transaction. Kamar is exceptionally talented, and I feel he is somewhat of an undiscovered treasure in this class that doesn't receive enough attention. I awarded Portland an A for this pick, as I believe he will significantly enhance their defense. He still needs to work on some offensive aspects, but given how late he was drafted, his 2-year impact statistically and overall has been impressive. At 57, Trayce Jackson-Davis is picked by Golden State, which earns him an A+ grade from me. Even at this point in the draft, he sometimes starts and provides great energy, and I really appreciate Jackson-Davis. The redrafted order is as follows: Victor Wembanyama, Amen Thompson, Brandon Miller, Grady Dick, Lively, Jordan Hawkins, Anthony Black, G.G. Jackson, Hayexes, and Bolkel I. A number of other players, too. Sure, that could be the case, but at the moment, that's my stance. It's a challenging class to evaluate, since they've only just begun their careers. The only players I feel very sure about are Amen Thompson and Brandon Miller at the forefront, and I look forward to reviewing this and possibly reassessing these players a couple of years down the line.